On the 14th bilunar perigee of the second dim season's equinox, the orphaner poses a colliginous riddle like no other I've met. I am presuming him bothered by jealousy, and would be sickening if it were not so marvelously amusing. But then, who but royalty could have the finned cheek to show disdain for the manner in which his black lover conducts her red conquests? Less is accelerated meeker than I to homicide, and the violation would hold me aghast, again, if his misgivings did not complement his so endearing arsenal of quaint flaws. It is impossible to stifle this grin even now as I write. He surely understands this as my maritime overlord, a superior, while through gritting fangs he would concede the expanse of my plunder makes his seem hardly worthwhile to trouble a map with Gooding over. I know he understands. I will take what I want. I expect nothing less from Dual Scar, and truly, less would offend me. Is it the crude blood of the suitors from which I have taken enjoyment recently? If his displeasure is with my blithe treatment of the social order, then he has either not spent enough time in the warm company of my indifference, or is simply very stupid. I saw the look he gave. He's so secure in knowing I can't feel what's in his mind that he forgets the traitorous ways of his own face. His little looks are words to me, interjections in our deliciously bitter repartee. First a look as I summon a slave from the hold, with such ease between my remarks. Why yes, Dual Scar, they were the very slaves in your hold until but this hour. Another ship deployed carelessly, languishing in strategic vulnerability. Is this not our routine, our dance? What is this look, my dear Kismises? Is it shame, envy, contempt for what he knows will follow? I nod her over. She is fearful, and it makes her prettier. He scoffs without a movement or sound. I know there is disgust feeding the shadows in his corner of my block. At least prick her in the light, he surely thinks. Determine what vulgar hue she bleeds before persisting with your abasement, Marquise. Do try to understand, orphaner. Not knowing is the point, and if you truly understood this, your crusade against the gamblingnets would not be among our grand high blood's most uproarious punchlines, if only one truly needed to be so high to find it amusing. And so not knowing, I take her will, but leave enough of it to enjoy her response. Her hands are in my service, but they still shake. They unfasten the first button at my jacket's waist, clumsily. I have masked the line between my puppeteering and her volition exquisitely, and her uncertainty over her own control fuels her fear. She unfastens the second button, and between the second and third, I make a casual remark to Dual Scar, continuing our conversation. He does not respond. I look again at the face of my slave, imagining for a moment her mind is not an unguarded port to her every dread. I imagine that I cannot feel her conviction that it's not merely a matter of whether she will be put to the irons, but how hot they will be if she fails to please. Poor thing. Her horns make attractive shapes and pair themselves pleasantly amidst her violent snarls of hair. Her fingers, which I have lost track of, to my surprise have come between the petticoat and my skin. The heat of her touch tells me the likely range for the color of her blood. I wouldn't have guessed it to look at her, not with her sign stripped. Her mouth opens slightly and I squint. Ah, razor sharp and none missing. Perfect. How disappointing it is to find quivering lips hiding dull teeth. I pause to consider. What will her fear become if I choose to show her mercy later, and even, in days, kindness? Will this be the red dalliance that becomes fully flushed? Love demands my cunning just as my raids. If it is to be, she will never understand how thoroughly she was manipulated, her body, her mind, her devotion. I remember Dual Scar again. My distraction from our banter was momentarily absolute, and I inquire into the shadows, but he is gone. Then go, my Kismises. Fume with the indignation I gave you. I can only pray it blackens our bond. I must know such exhibitions agitate him, and hence why I bother. Otherwise, it would be easy to dismiss him before I partook. Let it be a gift of antagonization to you, my dear rival, on which you may brew pitch for me anew. And if it is true envy, a vermilion yearning I can't abide, then though it pains me, it will be farewell. Alas, It may be that I am too good at spurring hate, too good, at least, for him. I only hope he is not so foolish as to tread a path of less torrid malice, for if he does... On the 16th. My suspicions have been confirmed. I'm not grinning anymore, Dual Scar. Our orderly contention has dissolved right before my vision eightfold. It was once a handsome black, but now sits like good strong tea, sullied and cooled by unwelcome dairy. Thus my heart was broken twice. I was fond of the slave. There was surely promise in her red investment. He had her assassinated. And so I am visited by a bit of bad luck for a change. It's not possible to evade it forever, I suppose. I will simply have to endure the misfortune of observing his base and artless measures of retaliation. He's applied his own resources to increase the bounty on my head. I wonder if he intends such a laughably ineffectual gesture as anything more than a formality, a symbol of his intent. If not, my smile, how it threatens to revisit, almost. I've broken laws, yes, but what has there been to pay for? If any act I've taken should demand a bounty, it was paid up front. I foot the bill myself with guile and supremacy. On the 20th, if only my horror were as bottomless as his desire to disappoint me, he is set on cowardice, deferring to others to settle his score. Doesn't he remember what he's confided? It would be easy to give the evidence to her imperious condescension, and he would be killed quickly for his unthinkable presumption. He's taken a great risk harboring red ambitions for an empress who will never even know his name. Not that I'll sink to his tactics. But then, he feels safety in knowing this. My sources say he is en route. On the 21st, I've learned Dual Scar has reported to the Grand High Blood all the intelligence he has on me and my fleet. It was information he'd guarded closely to protect our once mutually cherished rivalry. He couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands, lest another besiege me more effectively and cause me to wax for the usurper. Not that he'd raised that mass particularly high himself. The shortcomings I managed to overlook for the sake of a lover. I would have enjoyed witnessing the entertainment he prepared to please the High Blood. His sense of humor was dreadful. It would have been a true miracle if he survived the appointment. Funny. I always imagined a grander entry in my journal for your demise, Dual Scar. But I should have realized you would die as you lived. A joke. One more humorous little sacrifice kindly given to the subjugators, and one step closer to the release of the vast honk they prophesize. I am overjoyed to understand now this was always your destiny. It's been nearly a week since Dual Scar's fitting end, and I'd all but forgotten the matter. It seems the subjugators were not particularly inspired by his revelations about my affairs. Sources tell me their response was to commission one of the court's neophyte legislators to conduct the investigation and bring me to justice. Neophyte Red Glare is reported to be quite talented. I find no reason to doubt this. Still, how can I be caused any unrest to learn their recourse is to send a lone, inexperienced bureaucrat to apprehend me? I cannot view this as anything other than full concession by the High Bloods. They now only seek to maintain the appearance of pursuing me. Maybe they find my exploits amusing. I couldn't possibly disagree. Those rare moments when my superiors show wisdom come perilously close to restoring my faith in the social order. As for Red Glare, it would surprise me if I ever heard her name again. If she finds me, then I welcome her challenge, but I am so confident she will play no relevant role in my future, I won't even bother peering into my oracle to satisfy my curiosity. I suppose I'll have to get used to writing with this hand instead. I now do so in captivity, while I bring my all to bear on the immensity of the subjugators' high jinks. I took their gesture as plain avowal of my prosecution's futility. With a lone neophyte assigned to the task, how could I view it as otherwise? I was sure they'd drawn from the bottom of their deck, not intending to squander more competent mercenaries on one who'd made a show of outclassing them all before. But I discovered too late that Red Glare was their wild card all along. How is one allowed to be raised by a dragon in this era, let alone one of such middling blood, the sickly hue of a gutless civil servant? Those of her caste are typically pleased to mount a sluggish colorator, or some brainless squawking spleenfowl during petty expeditions to plaster seizure notices on gamblignant property. By what fluke was this woman granted such a weapon? permitting her to luxuriate in these delusions of righteousness. Something blocked the light of the unbidden moon, treating the harbor to darkness more grim than what fell to this season's apogee. I made the mistake of looking into its eyes, each like a sun concentrated into a small jewel, as two hot garnets searing through a black veil. I shut mine quickly, but the more sensitive of them was burned irreparably. When I regained sight in the other, there was only red. My fleet was in flames. The neophyte was on deck. Pyral Sprite, she mentioned through her ridiculous forced grin. She wanted me to know the name of the beast which was able to consume my Luce's whole. My dice were in the hold below. Not that my present luck would consent to a favorable roll anyway. I made a move for my blade. She took my arm, which I'm sure she kept as the tiniest of snacks for her ostentatious custodian. Maybe she meant to prove she wouldn't need me in irons to have my submission. Bound or free. 2, 1, or none. I wonder how well she knows it's not what I do with my arm she has to fear. I await my trial. Much fanfare was made of the trial, more than I would have dared to hope. It seems my luck has been returning of late. The Highbloods surely intended to make a spectacle of my conviction. They filled the court block with peasants ravenous for the comeuppance of a blue blood. I wasn't about to deny them what they came for. It was kind of the authorities to supply me with phalanx of such impressionable spectators. The weak wills were nearly as thick in the air as the rust in their veins. Funny how my other senses seemed to have peaked since exchanging glances with the dragon. What an extraordinary specimen. How I've come to covet the creatures since it ruined my fleet. I know too well the whispers of a dangerous new infatuation when they beckon, but I digress. It was simple enough to nudge the hostility of the low-bloods from one aristocrat to another. The subjuglators could not have been pleased, but nor could they have been altogether unamused, I would expect. I wonder if this was part of their unfathomable game. I'll never understand their riddles. I only regret I didn't get to hear the opening statement the neophyte had prepared against me. The case she compiled from all that evidence she burned must have been damning. I bet her remarks would have stung worse than when she severed my arm. She certainly would have shown me greater mercy by taking the other instead. Alas, I mocked to disguise the extent of my regret. Had my escape not necessitated her demise, she would have made a lovely rival. If she'd only discarded her childish preoccupation with justice, we might have made a striking scourge. Had we inched blacker, we'd have torn red miles across the land and sea. Unfortunately, the only miles to be found through her bureaucratic calling were those of red tape. When so ensnared, one is eventually bound to be choked. With the court block cleared, all that remained to obstruct my freedom was his honorable tyranny himself. Upon reflection, red glare showed the foresight of a true seer in thieving my arm before the trial. It permitted a fair fight. Though I was free, I had no fleet. No matter. With the Gamblignants decimated, I'd embraced the turn in fortune and pledged to put my sea-grifting ways behind me. With any luck, the skies will be in my future. My thoughts again returned to that dragon. But first, I was in need of temporary refuge. I sought it with the expatriate. He owed me for sweeps of protection I provided after his brazen defiance of the Highbloods. It was perhaps the only such courageous stand ever taken against a superior by one of his supercilious pedigree, and I'd not have bothered staking my neck out for another. But the admiration he'd won naturally wore thin as he persistently bemoaned his treason and banishment. And I was saddened to find this habit holding strong even now. I wonder if he still believes she was worth it. Repairing my arm would go a little further in squaring his debt with me. Even if I came with both intact, I might have ripped one off and put him to the task just to halt to his blubbering. Darklear was always a skilled machinist, and the work proved an adequate distraction. So pacified, he listened to what I had to say about my recent travails with the law and Pyral Sprite, and what I'd come for in truth, the treasure he'd been keeping safe for me. I cradled the oracle in my synthetic hand, as if appraising by weight the mystic qualities it still concealed. With my vision eightfold seared away, I was blind to its secrets as the old doctor was to its present whereabouts. I learned to keep it cloaked from the awareness of the man who once called me his protégé, a backhanded term of endearment from a smug manipulator. Locating his so-called dark pockets was the only gambit I had in countering his milk-tongued doublespeak. The expatriate, for indiscernible reasons, seemed naturally surrounded by such a void in the doctor's awareness, and was so uniquely fit to inherit the orb. The doctor could not see his treasure, nor I into it. I considered what to do with it for a while. Should I find Pyrosprite by consulting with the oracle, as I'd done so often to steal fortune from my adversaries? I guessed exploiting some technological means of gazing through its surface may have been simple enough, but I hesitated. Every expedient granted by its counsel, though never instantly, came at a price. Knowing his nature, I'm surprised I only now recognize it as yet another instrument of his spurious benevolence, dangerous by way of selective divulgence. The sense of infallibility his oracle brought me was superficial, and in hindsight weakened my readiness. Knowing my fate so far in advance, I took Red Clare's threat lightly. The greatest mistake I have ever made was asking the orb when I would die. But as I revisited the prophecy surrounding this unfortunate query, something struck me. I thought of the man I would have as my mate spirit centuries from now, who was said to command an army of beasts, the one it called the Summoner. If my obsession with the dragon should continue to burn for so long, would he be the one to assist me in taming it? I did not have enough knowledge to ask the right questions when I had the opportunity. Were that the case, I might have asked if it would be his rare abilities of communion that would bring Pyrosprite under control. Would it be on account of my influence? And if so, would I exert this influence by taking his will, or winning his heart? These are details I would have given no second thought in drawing from the orb, my curiosity a force usually too much to quell, but now. I have thought of the Summoner often. I have been troubled to know that as one so common-blooded, he could not possibly have hatched yet, nor will he wriggle from the caverns for many sweeps, so I must have patience to take up my role in his story of heroism. It is a tale which reads to me as though lifted from a child's story, yet I know I'd be a fool to doubt its veracity entirely. He would take rise through the ranks of the cavalry-reapers and assume command, having proven the most skilled and fearless of them. He would exhibit a remarkable pupation, the sort only recorded in myth, growing, or perhaps simply revealing, a striking pair of wings. His army thus inspired would spearhead a major rebellion, surely one at least on the scale of the sectarian revolt crushed by the Highbloods, who thereafter forbade its mention, or any invocation of the heretical symbols at all, even in private journals. Which is why I will stick to the fable of the Summoner, and not risk another execution with even oblique reference to the compelling tale of the sufferer. Resolution to the Summoner's mutiny is foggy, as I only understand what has been related to me through the brief answers I thought to solicit. Ultimately, the ire of the Condis would be such that in the settling dust of the conflict, she would banish all from the homeworld except the young. She would scatter all who reached maturity to the stars to fight her wars. I presume to keep them occupied, existing in a less centralized state from which such a coup may arise. This is still an incredible notion for me to consider, and I cannot imagine how she would come to enforce such an upheaval in our civilization, though I suppose she will have on her side the advantage of an unparalleled lifespan, and the leverage extended by the hideous psychic prongs of her deep, undulating monstrosity. That is, until it chooses another little witch to serve. Nevertheless, I take the prediction as truth, and find it amusing that a homeworld dominated by children will be the great Summoner's legacy, one of them at least. More importantly, and less amusing, his legacy will be my demise. You see, I first learned his name when I asked who would be the one to kill me. I have never spoken nor written of him out of contempt for the prophecy, but do so here, in my final entry for this journal. I took this to be a pitiable fate, and scoured the orb for any means of escaping it, or at least, to salvage a little dignity from the tale of my downfall. Alas, it had no consolation for my vanity. But as I sit here deciding what to do with the damnable little sphere, I understand my error. It was not in failing to chart a course through future events to turn my fortune's tide, even so many sweeps from now. It was in believing the future was mine to know, and fortune mine to control. If this hero is meant to breathe life into my embittered heart, and if he is to earn the right to run it through, then so be it. For him, I will commit to this page my highest expectations, and for what precious uncertainty is left in my future, I renew my vigorous anticipation. The oracle I will resolve to part with, I will conceal it in a crypt bearing the sign of the expatriate, with a map to its location hidden in this journal. To whomever finds it, be wary, for the truth it tells may leave its new keeper blind as I was, though no more.